Welcome to How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. Dive deep into humane leadership crafted for today's fast-paced business world. Listen to our podcast on all major streaming platforms and join us as we explore the essence of humane leadership in today's dynamic business landscape. I'm Chris Olerking, a Fortune 100 IT leader, alongside Roberto Torres, a seasoned startup engineering leader. Today, we're going to talk about how do you manage work expectations when you get married, and how does a humane leader discuss it with his top employee? A very topical subject for today, as Roberto should be congratulated. He just got back from his honeymoon, so congratulations.
Thank you very much, sir. First of all, good morning, and second, thank you very much. It's happy to be married.
You are looking very happy. However, I'm betting, there is some impact to your work-life balance as relationships change, right? So you go from you're swinging singles and you can do whatever you want and nobody expects anything of your time, and you can work really hard and become the top employee, but then you start relationships and you get married, and now you've got some other commitments, and now my top employee, Roberto's married, and his wife wants him to come home at a reasonable hour from work. Roberto, you were working so hard before. What's going on?
Yeah, indeed. And also, I will add that the on-calls are maybe minimized as possible. And before that, you had to pick up the phone or be ready maybe 24/7, and now it isn't. Now it's something that wouldn't happen, or wouldn't happen as before. But let me ask you, what would you do in that case? Would you talk with your top employee to correct this, or would you comply with our marriage?
I think one thing I would always recommend as a humane leader is if you think your expectations are shifting, or if you think someone's going to let you down, married or not, the earlier you have the conversation, the better off you're going to be, right? So let's say, through casual conversation, I know you're getting married, it's been planned for a while, it finally happens. Obviously, there's been some strain on your time during that as you're getting ready to get married. But, now you're getting older, more responsibilities. I understand, Roberto. So, I'm going to talk to you about it much earlier than later. I'm not going to wait till performance review time where I'm really upset. Man, there were 4 pages to get something fixed, and you didn't answer the phone calls. We had this critical deadline and you missed it because you went out of town for a 3-day weekend with your new wife, a month after the marriage. It's not good to let that kind of stuff sit. It's much better for us to talk about it up front and maybe even ask, what are the employee's expectations? Roberto, now that you're married, how is that going to change your work-life balance? Let's have a conversation before there's a crisis, before there's a system outage, before the deadline's missed. As the humane leader, we need to recognize events change things in our employees' lives. How is it going to be different? And it's okay that it's going to be different. But as a humane leader, you got to plan for it. And that's, I think, the thing that upsets most leaders, humane or inhumane, right? A boss or a humane leader. The thing that upsets them is surprises. So the humane leader should ask, Roberto, how is your life going to change? How is your work-life balance going to change now that you're married? Tell me about it.
I totally agree. I totally agree with that. And also, I would mean to say that this conversation had to be not after I get married, but before as well. Because maybe before I will tell you, no, dude, I won't change. Everything will be cool. Everything will be the same.
Every husband says that. Every husband. Wrong.
I'm playing my role. as we mentioned. And the thing is, it will change. And change is something that is good, and that we have to comply with that, that we had to embrace. And change is something that for both parties, in this case, the humane leader and the person who got married, have to fully understand. Maybe the humane leader would say, this guy usually brought me maybe 10 reports on a Friday, and I will be at ease with this. But now that I know that he will be with his wife or her husband, and maybe that Friday I won't get these 10 reports. Well, talk with this person and say, okay, since I know that you're going to leave early for the weekend, okay, how about you give me these reports on a Thursday? Manage the time during the whole week so you could give me the information that I require, and I won't nag you, and I won't be, breathing it on your back. Hey, where are the reports? And maybe texting you. So be prepared in advance for everything that before you gave me, and don't try to maybe say no, it's okay. No. Try in advance to plan what's going to happen.
What I just heard you say is you're communicating very clear expectations. You, as the humane leader, are saying, these are the expectations I have, but I'm being flexible. Hey, maybe we could make the due date the day before the weekend, meaning do it on Thursday, or maybe do it by noon on Fridays instead. So we do a deadline of when the data, the cutoff on the data, because in my executive world, lots of times the big debate was, when is the cutoff period for collecting fresh data? And then when are the reports, what is that data based on? If the data is based on calendar end, actual calendar end, right? Like June 30th or July 31st, well, don't expect the report if it's very complicated and needs data validation. Don't expect it on June 29th. I don't have all the data. It's impossible, right? So sometimes some of those things, the humane leader is going to have that kind of discussion on expectations. I think the other thing that the married person needs to consider is, were they working a lot of overtime because they could? Like, well, it keeps me from going out spending, and I don't spend as much time at the bars. I'm saving up for the wedding. So I'm working more. Maybe they were working an extra 15, 20%, maybe even more than that. But now that they're married, they want to get home to their spouse, and they're only going to work 40 hours because they want to get home. That's okay. But also realize that other members of the team are now, it's a competition. And so maybe this number one employee who's now been married is still meeting the expectations of the job, but working less. They may not be the number one member of the team anymore, which is okay. Maybe they're now the average member of the team. That's okay. They're meeting the expectations of the job. But the married person may need to realize, wow, I was always number one, and now I'm not. Yeah, because it's a competition, and you were number one because you were putting in 25% more hours, and you got way more than what I expected done. So of course I always rated you as my top performer and gave you bigger pay raises. But now you're just meeting the expectations. You're just doing the job. That's okay. That's what we're paying you for. But you're not number one anymore. So yeah. both sides need some, need to have some conversations and look at things objectively, because you set objective measures, right? Just like you were saying, you get the reports, this many reports by this time. Those are all nice and objective. So you can have a conversation before there's disappointment, before the humane leader is disappointed, before the married guy is disappointed, right? Have those conversations early.
Oh, yeah. And one thing also is that even though this married guy might not be the top performer anymore. They might be adapting, and I mean the married person as well as the humane leader. And what I mean adapt is you were my top performer. What can we do for you to reach those numbers again? Maybe it is not the number of hours that you have to work. Maybe, I don't know, you decrease the number of hours that you used to work by 25, 30%. But since you have all this experience and you were a top performer, what can you do to grab all that and put it on onto the work that you do and beginning rising in this performance, in this productivity? And I know that both people will manage to visualize what require and what is needed to be done, not to to deviate both people and say, okay, everybody's going to be in different paths. Okay, let's bring it on and talk. What can you do? Okay, usually before you have, I don't know, you were working at night to deliver this. What can you do day to deliver this and deliver that? So I think that in this case, as in any case, excuse me, communication is the most important soft skills that you had to apply both in both ways, to listen and to talk, and to manage to get a this performance on track again.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that once you get married, you're suddenly average, or once you get married, you lose focus and can't be a top performer. I think to some degree, if you think about it first in a just a pure measurement perspective, right? I hired you to make 10 boxes a day, and you were making 15 and 20 boxes a day because you stayed 4 hours later, because it takes a certain amount of time to make a box. Well, and even though you're the best, you can make boxes 1.5 times better than somebody else. But still, you made 20 boxes, but you also stayed 4 hours later. So now you've cut your work time to normal and you're making 12 boxes, still above average. But it's 12 boxes, not 20 boxes that you were doing before. And so you're above average. And guess what? Compared to the rest of the team, they're only making 10. Some guys are only making 8. So you're still top, but you're not as top as making 20 boxes. And that's something, when it's something that measurable, that both the humane leader and the objective employee have to have those conversations to say, look, I'm happy that you're married. And I agree, life is changing as you're getting older. Maybe we can work on your efficiency, think about more creative ways, and you can get 14 boxes done in 8 hours. So that's still above what I'm paying you. You're a top performer, big pay raise, keep continuing. I think the struggle is that in our IT kinds of careers, performance is a little bit harder to measure than when it's, let's say, making boxes. It's having a good conversation with your employee about how you're going to measure that as objectively as you can. And the more into management and the higher you are in the organization, those objective measures get harder and harder to set. But the reality is in general, it does tend to take more time, no matter how creative you are. It tends to take more time to do things in general. So if there was, because of the marriage, a significant reduction in the amount of hours worked, there can be, not always, but there can be a loss in the total amount of output. Creativity may still be just as high. And let's say you're in marketing, so you're rated on your creativity of ideas. Well, if the creativity is just as high, and that's what I reward you for, and you get it done in 6 hours versus 12, you're still my top performer and you're doing the best. But somewhere in the difference between very objective, I'm a box maker and I make 10 boxes a day, and before I used to do 20 and now I'm only doing 12, I'm still better than average, but not that much better than average, versus more creative jobs, marketing, sales, whatever. Maybe sometimes it's harder to measure performance. And just as a married person and just as the humane boss, you got to do your best to make those measurable. So if there is some change, which is totally acceptable, you're now married, but both parties need to realize it is going to be different. Things will be different. Just are they acceptable different? And is there some career impact where the humane leader might have to have a tough conversation with an employee that, hey, you still did a great work, Roberto, and here's the average pay raise we gave everybody else who did an average job this year. Here's your average pay raise, Roberto. What? I was expecting a doubling of my pay. Well, yes, but this year, you know, it wasn't as amazing as last year. I don't know what changed, you know. Maybe it's not because you got married, but somehow your focus is different. Be ready to have that conversation. And I would hope along the way, the humane leaders having that discussion over the whole year, performance-wise, right? So it's not a surprise to the newly married employee that, holy cow, I'm now your number 3 employee out of, you know, I'm not number 1, I'm now number 3. I still might be higher than the other 10 employees, but now I'm only number 3 and I'm not number 1. That shouldn't be a shock to the employee. You should have that discussion and be giving feedback. But the employee also has to realize, well, gosh, yeah, now that I think about it, you know, I mean, I have other things going on in my life. That's okay. You know, that's totally fine. But also realize that your number 1 priority isn't your job anymore. Whereas maybe some single guy who's 26 and he wants to make a name for himself, he's, you know, driving hard. Happens.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, when a humane leader will have this tough conversation, it shouldn't be a surprise for the humane leader. And I know that it will be for the married person, but it shouldn't be for the humane leader, because that humane leader is the one who was watching all these performance graphics and all the crunching all these numbers and going with the hard data. So it will bring this hard data and say, okay, man, this has been according all your numbers during all these months. So rather than saying, okay, what happened over here, you will understand because this person got married. But one thing also is that you as a humane leader have to also maintain productivity. And by that, maybe it is time to say this to this person. And say, okay, why don't you train other guys within the team so we could manage to rise that team productivity, not mentioning the individual. And with that, there might happen 2 things. The first one, you might boost this guy. What? I will train some other people and I will lose my first number of the leaderboard? Hell no. I will do what is required to comply with my productivity. That's the first one. And the second one might be the opposite. You might say, okay, yes, I'd rather be with my wife, with my husband, to be doing this. And I will train some others, and you will maintain the productivity, and maybe you will find a crack or you will find a rock star better than the guy who was to use before, no?
Right. And those advanced skills of training others, mentoring others, potentially leading into management might also be a promotion avenue for this married person who's now looking at life differently. Before, they wanted to be an individual contributor. I don't want to have to deal with the hassles of managing people, and I just want to code, or I just want to come up with creative ideas for marketing. But now that they're married, they're like, and I'm looking to eventually double my pay. And so in our particular company, the way to do that is to go into the management ranks. So now they want to learn new skills. And again, these are conversations that the humane leaders having with this employee as their vision of life changes, because that's what marriage does to you, right? Is your vision of what the future can be becomes a bit different, and what you want to have the future be like becomes different. And again, it's this ongoing conversation. It isn't something that you sit down with the employee and have for 16 hours straight. We're going to figure this all out right now in one conversation. It's these multiple conversations over time where you're developing the rapport that's now different with your employee because they're married, right? And to a degree, even the employee has to think about this over time. This isn't something that the employee comes back from the wedding after the honeymoon with, I got my next 30 years of career planned out, boss. Let's talk about it, and figure it all out. I suppose it could happen, but that's probably not how it happens most of the time, right? And so again, I don't want anybody to think that just because you got married, you'll never get promoted. That's absolutely not true. I mean, I got married, got promoted a bunch of times. But it is, what do you as the employee to continue your promotions are probably not going to be through more hours spent, more exhaustion, trying to do double the output of your competition. Instead, it's new skill sets, things that are more valuable to the company, right? That help you move along in your career and provide for your new family, right? Because you're married now, new family. So have those conversations with your humane leader. What can I do? Let's talk about career path, because it's now more important to me than it was before, because someone else is depending on me. It's not just me surviving by myself anymore. And maybe eventually there's children and an expanding family, right? So, those are multiple conversations that take place over time. But again, like I said, in the short term, what I have seen is that number one employees have a tendency to become number two or number three, at least initially, because the only change that is occurring is that they are expanding their family and they're spending their time doing other stuff. And so they don't provide as much value to the company. Still meet expectations, still a great employee, just not the number one employee anymore, which is not necessarily bad.
Yeah. And the thing is, if that humane leader is a married one, they will understand, and they will tell this married person that, hey, expenses will rise. And for you to keep with those expenses, you might have to work not harder, better to gain your bonus or
on new
to
things,
have,
right? New things, new skills, right?
Yeah. And with that in mind, that person might not change their work behavior. They will say, okay, right now I didn't require as much the bonus I will require. So I will do whatever is required. And one thing is, this married person is married, it will be in a different team. It is with his wife. So usually people marry someone with the same values and the same mindset. And maybe that wife will tell, okay, dude, you don't have to be slack in this time. You have to be productive. So maybe it will push further, or it will boost that person in order to be productive.
Yes, exactly. And again, I think you can kind of sum it all up in the key thing is that the humane leader will have ongoing discussions with the employee who's now married, right? The humane leader doesn't want it to be a shock 1 year from the marriage that the humane leader has to tell the employee that they didn't do as good. That should never happen. And the married employee should realize their life is going to change. And maybe some of their focus and their energy towards work will be less potentially. And if it is, that's okay. But realize then you may not be number one employee if that's the case, right? Because the company expects what's the output? What did you produce for the company? And hopefully a great leader, a humane leader, is paying you fairly for your output. And if you choose to output less, which is okay, just don't expect to be number one. Just you're not judged on past behavior. Although your wife may judge you on past behavior, so be careful. That's wife rules, work rules, totally different.
Okay. Got it. Well, cool, man. I do trust that any person who listens to this episode is going to get married, know what's going to happen in the talks and their communication with their humanator.
At least at work. At home, I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm married for a long time and I still don't know what's going on.
Okay. Let's trust that your wife doesn't listen to that.
I'm sure she does not listen to these podcasts.
Got it. Well, with this, I think we should end this episode, and we'll see each other next week.
Absolutely.